Hi, I'm Rowena. They told her, "Stay in the lounge, Mom. We'll come back for you after check-in." But they never did. They boarded the flight to Hawaii without her, without a single glance back. 9 hours, no call, no text, just silence, like she didn't matter, like she was a piece of luggage someone forgot to claim. And me, I walked away from a $26 million deal just to sit beside her. But what came next? They never saw it coming. Before we dive in, tell me, what time are you listening to this and where from? Drop it in the comments. This story, it might remind you of someone. Or maybe it's a warning. Either way, you won't forget it. Monday mornings usually followed a reliable rhythm. Seattle fog curled low over the bay. The hum of early traffic pulsed beneath my apartment, and my cappuccino always cooled faster than I could finish it. I just hung up on a high-stakes call with a New York investor about a merger when my personal phone lit up. "Hey, just an FYI, we're headed out today. All good." A text from Callista. Short, vague, perfectly her. No warmth, no detail. Just the kind of half-communication she'd mastered over the years. I stared at it, thinking it probably meant she and Joran were taking our mother to her doctor's appointment, or maybe some last-minute family errand. I didn't ask. I'd learned that much. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that at that exact moment, my mother was sitting quietly in a brown leather chair inside the SeaTac lounge, her hands folded neatly over her lap, her gaze fixed on the sliding glass doors like they were going to open at any second. She was still smiling when the first hour passed. They told her, "Stay here, Mom. We'll come get you after check-in." Odessa, bless her heart, believed them. Of course she did. That was her nature. Trusting, gentle, forgiving in a way that didn't belong in this era. She'd kissed them goodbye with that soft, weathered affection only a woman who'd raised 3 children could carry. She clutched her old cardigan around her shoulders, sat still, and waited. And waited. The lounge grew crowded. People rushed past with carry-ons and earphones and frappuccinos. The morning flights to Los Angeles and Dallas came and went. Still she sat, her purse on her lap like a lifeline. No ticket in hand, no suitcase, just her. At some point, the staff noticed her. A young airline agent, fresh-faced, maybe 22, leaned down and asked gently, "Ma'am, are you waiting for someone?" "Yes," she said with a smile that cracked at the edges. "My kids are just checking in. They'll be right back." She said it like a promise. The agent returned an hour later, concern replacing protocol. Odessa gave the same answer, this time a little quieter. He nodded but didn't walk away. Instead, he spoke with another agent. They checked flight logs. That's when it happened. He returned, sat beside her, and said softly, "Ma'am, your children boarded a flight to Honolulu 6 hours ago." Her lips parted. Nothing came out. Her body didn't move. Just her hands, trembling slightly. Her eyes searched the entrance like she didn't believe him. Then the color drained from her face, and something inside her folded, like a book snapped shut. I didn't know any of this yet. I was across town, standing at the head of a long mahogany conference table, explaining tax shielding to a group of venture capitalists, when my personal phone rang again. Unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't have answered. But something in me, I don't know. I just picked up. "Hi, is this Ms. Rowena Morgan?" "Yes." "This is customer service from SeaTac Airport. We have your mother here with us. She's been in the lounge for most of the day. Alone." I didn't breathe for several seconds. "What do you mean alone?" I asked. My voice was already cold. She said her children told her they were checking in, but they never returned. We checked the manifest. They boarded a flight to Hawaii early this morning. The air went out of the room. I heard someone in the meeting say, "Rowena, you good?" But it was background noise. I grabbed my bag, said emergency, and walked out without a second glance. I sped through downtown traffic, my hands shaking at red lights. My mother wasn't forgetful. She wasn't delusional. She was 72, yes, but her mind was sharp, her memory better than mine on most days. And yet they left her. Just left her. Like luggage that didn't make the weight limit. I remembered the last Thanksgiving. Callista had said, laughing, "She forgets so much these days, I'm surprised she remembers her own birthday." Joran had rolled his eyes. "She's not that bad. But let's be honest, she's slowing us down." And Luther, my stepfather, who had once charmed his way into our home with polished boots and a silver tongue, just sipped his wine and muttered, "She's old. She won't remember." They thought it didn't matter. But I remembered. Every little dig. Every quiet dismissal. Every time they forgot to include her on family calls or accidentally booked vacations with no extra room. This wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. I knew my family now, and I knew they had no shame. As I raced down I-5 toward the airport, I whispered to myself over and over, "Just get to her. Just get to her." Red lights, talking to myself out loud, "Stay calm. She's okay. Just get to her." But my voice cracked halfway through that sentence. The closer I got to the terminal, the harder it was to breathe. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I kept seeing her face, soft, sweet, always waiting. I remembered her hands, warm and steady, guiding mine as she taught me how to braid hair for the first time in our old kitchen. She used to say, "Tension at the root, darling, gentle but firm." Now I was the one unraveling. I didn't bother finding a proper spot, just pulled up fast into the short-term lot and left the engine ticking behind me. Didn't pay, didn't look back. My heels hit the concrete hard as I rushed into the terminal, the sound of them echoing with each step. People moved around me, wheeling suitcases, talking into earbuds, sipping coffee. Their world kept turning. Mine had narrowed to one image. Her. I passed Gate D and caught sight of her across the lounge, curled up like something abandoned. Her cardigan had slipped from her shoulder, and her cheeks looked pale, thinner somehow. She was smaller than I remembered, fragile in a way that made my stomach turn. A paper cup sat beside her, untouched, like she didn't trust even that. Her eyes blinked slowly, unfocused, and for a moment she just stared straight ahead like nothing around her belonged to her anymore. Then I saw her lips move. "Oh. Rowena?" It was barely more than a whisper. I froze. My chest tightened. That sound, uncertain, almost childlike, knocked the air out of me. I'd seen my mother strong, stubborn, and even sarcastic. But never like this. Never so lost. I dropped beside her, knees on that industrial carpet. "Mom, it's me. I'm here." She touched my cheek like she had to be sure I was real. Her fingers were cold. I thought they were just checking in. My arms wrapped around her shoulders, and I felt how sharply her bones pressed through the sweater. I swallowed hard. They lied to you. They left you. But I'm here now. Her head leaned into my chest, and for a while, we just sat like that. A stranger walked by and slowed down, watching, then kept going. I helped her to her feet, careful with her joints, and slid my own blazer over her shoulders. She still shivered. I wrapped my arm around her waist, guiding her toward the terminal exit. Then I stopped and pulled out my phone. I typed, fast, fingers shaking. "Where are you? Do you know you left her here for 9 hours?" The response didn't come right away. We reached the elevator, rode it down in silence. She leaned slightly into my arm, like she couldn't keep herself upright for long. By the time we reached the curb outside, my phone buzzed. "Callista, don't make this a big deal. Mom always does this." We needed a break. I read it once, then again. Mom always does this. I stared at the screen, the words burning into my eyes like acid, the casual cruelty, like Odessa was an old appliance that kept glitching. This, not Mom, not she, not even her, just this. I bit down hard on my lip to keep from screaming in front of my mother. "You okay, baby?" she asked, touching my arm. I forced a smile. "Let's get out of here." Inside, though, I wasn't okay. I was shaking. The valet called after me, saying I'd parked in the wrong area, but I ignored him. Got her settled into the car, buckled her belt like she was 5 years old again. I tucked a bottle of water beside her seat and gently patted her hand. That's when a voice behind me called, "Ma'am?" I turned. One of the staff from the lounge earlier, short, with thick glasses and a blue lanyard, approached cautiously. I saw what happened. I just wanted to say, if you want to see the security feed, we can show you what happened this morning. It's protocol, sometimes helps to document things. I paused, then nodded. He led me back through a staff hallway into a quiet room with a dozen small monitors. One of them had time-stamped footage queued up. And there it was, crystal clear, Callista, Joran. Walking swiftly away from the lounge doors, both of them laughing, coffee cups in hand. No hesitation, no glances back. No one looked lost or confused. Joran even tossed his boarding pass into a trash bin as they headed toward security. They weren't coming back. Not ever. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was abandonment. I felt bile rise in my throat. "Turn it off," I said. He hesitated. "Please." He clicked the screen dark. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly. "Me too," I muttered, walking away. I made it back to the car. Mom was humming something under her breath, one of those old hymns she used to sing while cooking. She smiled at me when I opened the door, like nothing bad had happened, like her faith still held her together, even after all this. "I'm sorry you had to leave work," she said softly. I didn't answer, just crouched beside her and gently buckled her seatbelt. The soft click of the buckle felt like some final invisible line being drawn. As I slid into the driver's seat, I looked at her again. Really looked. She'd aged more in the last 9 hours than the last 9 years. And it hit me. They would have let her sit there until someone else dealt with her. They would have let her vanish from their lives like she didn't matter. As I pulled away from the curb, merging back onto the freeway, I whispered to myself. Not out loud this time, but deep in my gut, where real promises live. They don't get another chance. Never again. I reached over and squeezed her hand gently. She leaned toward me, resting her head against the window. "I knew you'd come," she murmured. And I drove, jaw clenched, heart burning, planning silently. I carried Mom inside my apartment with one arm around her shoulders and the other gripping the strap of her bag. The hallway lights flickered a little, bad wiring I still hadn't fixed, and everything felt dimmer than usual, like the world itself had lost some color. She paused at the entry, hesitating like she didn't want to dirty the floor. I told her gently, "You live here now, Mom. You don't have to ask." She offered a faint smile but didn't respond. I led her to the couch, fluffed the pillows, and pulled the throw blanket over her knees. It was too quiet. No TV. No soft music. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of 2 people pretending everything was fine. I made chicken soup from scratch, just like she used to, but when I set the bowl down in front of her, she only poked at it with the spoon, never taking a bite. I sat across from her, trying not to stare too hard at how tired her eyes looked. "Maybe they just got mixed up," she said suddenly, so soft it barely carried over the table. "They didn't, Mom." Her shoulders lifted, then dropped. "Maybe they didn't mean to. Leave me like that." I didn't answer. I couldn't lie, but I couldn't break her more than they already had. So I shifted the conversation. "Remember when you used to teach Sunday school? You had those cut-out felt stories and the singing stick?" Her lips curved. Oh Lord, those kids were so loud. One of them bit me once, hard. We both laughed. It didn't last. Her eyes dropped back to the bowl, and the silence stretched again. Later that night, after she'd fallen asleep sitting upright on the couch, I grabbed my laptop and headed into the kitchen. I couldn't shake the pit in my stomach. Something about all of it didn't sit right. Not just the abandonment, but the way they'd planned it. The way they walked away without even a glance back. I had friends in travel logistics, and I wasn't above calling in a favor. A quick text to an old client, now a regional manager with Horizon Pacific Airlines, got me what I needed in under an hour. When the email arrived, I clicked it with more force than necessary. The PDF loaded slowly, like it knew it was about to ruin my night. The manifest showed final boarding for Flight 486 to Honolulu. Passenger list, 16 names. I skimmed for hers. No Odessa, not even as a cancellation, not even as standby. My breath caught. My hands gripped the edge of the countertop as the realization bloomed in my chest like poison. They never intended for her to go. I stared at the screen so long it went dim. The bile in my throat burned. All this time she'd been blaming herself, saying maybe they forgot, maybe they were stressed. But the truth was worse. They planned it, bought their seats, packed their bags, took their vacation selfies, and never once thought about her sitting alone in that terminal. The knot in my chest turned to fire. I grabbed my phone. Joran answered on the third ring. "Hey, Rowena, what's up?" There was no apology in his voice, no shame, just the smug drawl he always used when he thought he'd gotten away with something. "You left Mom at the airport." He sighed like I'd asked him to fix a flat tire. "She wasn't gonna enjoy Hawaii. The heat, the walking. Come on, Rowena. She can barely get through the mall without resting every 10 steps." "So you left her? In a public lounge? Alone? No phone call? No note? Nothing?" He huffed. "Look, don't guilt-trip me. You were always the golden child anyway, the emotional one. We thought you'd sweep in eventually." I froze. "You thought I'd..." "What?" "She's your favorite. Always has been. We just did what was easiest. It's not like she was hurt." My mouth went dry. I didn't wait for him to finish. I hung up. The silence afterward was worse than the call. I stared down at the phone, like maybe it would take it all back. Like maybe this was a nightmare, and I'd wake up to Mom laughing in her old kitchen, holding a pie and humming Patsy Cline. But I didn't wake up. Instead, I walked back into the living room. She was still asleep, hands folded neatly like she was praying in her dreams. I started folding the laundry she'd helped me sort earlier. Her purse had fallen open on the edge of the couch. I went to zip it up and caught sight of a small ivory envelope tucked beside her glasses case. I paused. It had my name on it. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. Inside was a simple card, soft blue with a painted hydrangea. Her handwriting, still neat despite the tremor in her fingers lately, read, "Thank you for always listening. You got my kindness, even when others saw it as weakness. I hope one day we can all be together again. Love you always, Mom." The postmark was never stamped. Dated 3 days ago, 3 days before they abandoned her. Tears welled up, but I didn't let them fall. I folded the card and held it close for a moment, then slid it back where I found it. No need for her to know I'd read it. She'd written it hoping, wishing, believing in people who'd already made their choice. I sat beside her, quietly, watched her sleep. And when midnight came and the world outside was silent and black, I lay on my own bed staring up at the ceiling. This wasn't about a vacation. This was a declaration. They'd drawn a line and left her on the wrong side of it. But I was done straddling the fence. Done trying to make peace in a war they started. No more excuses. No more pretending we were still a family. I whispered into the dark. They left her, but I won't. And the weight of that promise settled deep into my bones. I didn't sleep that night. I tried. Lord knows I tried. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. Mom, sitting there on my couch, folded so small, like the world had crushed her down to half her size. That letter in her purse. It played on loop in my head. By dawn, I gave up pretending. I slipped out of bed, tiptoed into the kitchen, and started the coffee. The soft gurgle of the machine was the only sound in the stillness. Outside the window, the sky was just turning that pale gray blue of morning. I wrapped my arms around myself while I waited for the brew to finish, watching steam curl upward. Mom was still asleep, curled on the couch under the same blanket she'd refused to part with. Her breathing was steady, but her face looked hollow, as if whatever held her together had been quietly packed up and carried away. I brought my mug to the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and pulled up a housing site. I'd been thinking about it for a while. Maybe it was time. Not just temporary help, not just Band-Aids. If Mom was going to stay with me for good, she deserved more than a couch and a throw blanket. She deserved dignity. A small 2-bedroom condo came up in Westview, close enough to the hospital, quiet neighborhood, low stairs. I bookmarked it. That's when the knock came. It was a sharp, confident knock. 3 raps. Not the hesitant kind you expect from a neighbor or delivery. This was official. I stood up slowly. The air shifted in my chest, something instinctual clenching tight. When I opened the door, a woman in her mid-50s stood before me. Gray blazer, black slacks, clipboard in hand. She smiled, but it wasn't warm. "Good morning." "I'm Lorraine Danton with Adult Protective Services," she said, flashing a badge before tucking it away just as quickly. "We received a concern report about your mother. May I come in?" I froze. My mouth opened, but no words came. She tilted her head slightly. "It won't take long. I promise." I stepped aside. She walked in with the poise of someone used to tension. Her eyes scanned the apartment quickly. Pictures on the wall, the pile of folded laundry, Mom's cardigan slung over the arm of the couch. "Where is Odessa now?" she asked. "Sleeping," I managed. Lorraine jotted something down. Then, without looking up, the report we received alleged that she may have been removed from an airport against her will, that she's currently being held here, away from other family members. I blinked. "Excuse me?" She kept her voice calm. The language used was isolation and possible emotional coercion. It also mentioned concerns of financial manipulation. I felt the air leave my lungs. My fingers gripped the side of the kitchen chair to stay upright. Who said that?" She didn't answer, but she didn't have to. Of course it was Callista. I should have seen this coming. Lorraine looked up. "Would it be all right if I spoke to your mother? If she's up to it?" I nodded slowly. "Give me a minute." I crossed the room to the couch, knelt beside Mom, and gently touched her shoulder. She blinked awake, groggy, then alert the moment she saw my face. "What's wrong?" "There's someone here to talk with you, Mom. A social worker. She just wants to ask some questions." Her eyes widened, panic flickering behind them. "Am I being taken somewhere?" I shook my head. "No, you're safe. Just talk to her. Tell her what happened." I helped her sit up. Lorraine pulled over a chair, keeping a respectful distance. "Hi, Odessa," she began. "I just want to make sure you're okay. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got here?" Mom's voice was quiet. "I was at the airport. They said I had a ticket to Hawaii. I waited, but they never came back. I sat there for hours. My phone had no charge. I thought maybe something had gone wrong. But then Rowena came for me." Lorraine nodded. "And before that, were you looking forward to the trip?" Mom hesitated. "Yes, at least I thought I was going. but no one really said much to me, just told me to be ready. Did you feel unsafe? Pressured in any way? Mom looked at me, then back to Lorraine. No, not by Rowena. She's the only one who's looked out for me. Lorraine scribbled notes, then turned to me. What do you do for work, Ms. Langley? I'm a freelance medical editor. I work from home. And who else lives here? Just me. Until Mom came. Do you handle her finances? I reached for my laptop, pulled up a folder labeled Mom, and opened the files. These are the emails from my sister. The text history. Here's a screenshot of the flight manifest. No seat was ever booked in her name. I confirmed it with Horizon Pacific. I also have voicemail records and timestamps from the airport camera system. I can get more if you need it. Lorraine took her time reviewing everything. Her fingers paused over the flight manifest. This contradicts everything I was told, she murmured. I didn't say anything. She sat in silence for a moment, tapping the pen against her chin. Then she stood. Well, I don't see any indication of abuse or coercion here. Quite the opposite. I appreciate your cooperation. She walked to the door, then paused and turned back. Between you and me, she said, voice lower. Families like yours. This isn't rare. When aging parents become inconvenient, it's easier for some to push responsibility onto the ones who still have a conscience. You're not the first person I've met who's had to clean up someone else's mess. I swallowed hard. She handed me her card. If anything escalates, call me directly. Don't wait. I thanked her and closed the door after she left. The moment the latch clicked, I leaned against it, feeling like I'd just been cracked open from the inside out. They weren't done. This wasn't just abandonment. This was a setup. That night, I made a warm dinner, something simple, and watched an old movie with Mom on the couch. Neither of us said much. Her hand rested over mine, and I didn't move. Around 9:00, my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number at first, but when I answered, the voice dripped through the receiver like syrup. So, how's our little guest? Callista asked sweetly. I didn't respond. She kept talking like it was some joke between sisters. I ended the call, then blocked the number. I stood at the sink rinsing our dinner plates when Mom's voice broke the quiet. Do you still go to church on Sundays? She asked, not looking up from the orange she was peeling. I paused for a beat. Sometimes, I said carefully. Not lately. She nodded. I want to go tomorrow. I turned fully to look at her. Are you sure? Her hands stilled. Rowena, I don't want to hide. I want to sit in that sanctuary again. I want people to see me, to see who stood by me. That was all she said. But the look in her eyes said more than enough. So that next morning, just after 9 a.m., I helped her into a soft cardigan, brushed out her hair, and we made our way to the old white church on Maple Ridge. The one I'd grown up in. The one where everyone knew everyone else, and where news traveled faster than the offering plate. The moment we stepped inside, the room shifted. Some turned their heads politely. Others whispered. One woman smiled too hard and turned away before we could sit near her. But I'd expected this. What I didn't expect was how calmly Mom moved down the aisle, hand light on my arm, chin slightly lifted. We chose a seat in the back row, quiet, tucked away, but her presence still pulsed in the air. The pastor, Reverend Alton, stepped to the pulpit right at 10. His voice, as always, was steady, warm, like worn flannel. This morning's message, he began, is about honor, not just from children to parents, but from parents to their children as well. The cycle of dignity. Mom shifted beside me. I felt her breath catch, just once, and I placed my hand gently over hers. He continued, speaking of mutual care, of respect given and received, of how love can't flourish where shame lives. I saw Mom blink hard a few times. It was about halfway through the sermon that I heard the creak of the side door. I turned just slightly, and there they were. Callista, in a powder blue blouse, feigning innocence like it was an art, and Joran, stiff and silent behind her. They walked in as if they hadn't left a trail of wreckage behind them, as if they belonged. Callista gasped when she spotted us. "Mom?" she said aloud, loud enough for heads to turn. "You're here?" She started walking down the aisle, the picture of manufactured surprise. "Oh my goodness, we've been trying to reach you," Joran followed, his face carved from something colder than stone. "We've been so worried." I said nothing, just let them perform. The pastor paused, his gaze flicking toward the disturbance, but he held his place. Callista leaned toward Mom. "You should have told us where you were staying. But Mom rose, slowly, with the kind of weight that comes not from weakness, but from gathering years of silence and stitching them into strength. She stood tall, adjusting her sweater, and turned to face the front. "I need to say something," she said, her voice tremoring. Reverend Alton gave a small nod, stepping back from the pulpit. The sanctuary held its breath. Odessa's voice was soft at first. "You weren't looking for me." She didn't look at Callista or Joran. She looked forward, at the altar, at the cross, at the crowd. "You left me sitting at an airport, alone, for 9 hours. Her voice gained firmness. There was no ticket, no flight, just silence. A gasp rippled across the pews. Someone dropped a bulletin. A cough was quickly stifled. I waited and waited, but no one came. Not my daughter, not my son-in-law. Just silence. Her eyes flicked toward the front row, and yet my other daughter did. Rowena came. She didn't hesitate. She didn't ask who should have gone first. She just showed up. She turned fully now, facing the room. Her voice didn't waver. "I've been made to feel like an afterthought for years, like a burden. But that morning, I realized who truly sees me, and who doesn't." She paused, her breath catching again. Then, calm. "I'm not ashamed of where I've been. I'm proud I finally saw clearly. And I'm proud of my daughter, Rowena." Silence followed. And then, clap. 1, then 2, then an entire wave of hands, applause rising like thunder through the stained glass light. Even Reverend Alton bowed his head. Callista's face paled. Joran's jaw locked. They stood frozen for a moment, then turned and left, just as quietly as they'd come. Outside, I stepped into the crisp sunlight with Mom beside me. Callista was already waiting by the curb. She stormed toward us. "What did you tell her?" she hissed at me, her voice low but venomous. I didn't flinch. "Nothing." "Don't play games, Rowena." I met her glare. "She saw you clearly, for the first time." Joran stepped forward, face flushed. "You've poisoned her against her own family." "No," I said calmly. "You did that yourselves." They didn't respond, just turned and walked away, shoes clacking sharply on the concrete like they were fleeing the truth itself. Back at home, the silence felt lighter. Mom sat at the kitchen table, slicing peaches. She hummed, a tune I recognized from years ago, back when she used to hum while folding laundry or stirring soup. It had been so long. "I think I can sleep tonight," she said, sliding a bowl my way. I smiled. Good. For the first time in weeks, my chest didn't feel like it was being crushed by the weight of everything unspoken. That night, we watched the sunset through the open window. Quiet, peaceful, until the phone rang. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. A smooth, professional voice greeted me. "Miss Langley, This is Martin Kraus, attorney for the Langley family estate. There have been recent developments concerning your father's trust. I didn't say a word. He continued, I believe it's urgent we speak, preferably before others do. The lawyer's voice still echoed in my head long after the line had gone dead. I stood in the kitchen, phone resting on the counter, Odessa humming a low tune as she dried the last of the breakfast dishes. Who was that, honey? She asked, not turning. I hesitated. A lawyer. Said he's been trying to reach you for over a month. She paused, towel clenched in her hands. What for? It's about Dad, I said. His estate. She blinked, her face unreadable. That was nearly 3 years ago. I know, I said softly. He said, something doesn't add up. Odessa didn't speak again that morning. She just nodded and went back to wiping the counter, slower this time, as if the weight of her breath was heavier than she was letting on. We drove to the lawyer's office the next day, downtown. 10th floor. The elevator ride was long and silent, except for the hum of the building and the occasional ding as we passed each floor. Odessa stared ahead, hands folded neatly in her lap. Not tense, just distant, like her thoughts were floating somewhere a few years behind us. When the doors opened, a man in a navy vest greeted us at the entrance. Ms. Langley and Mrs. Loring? His handshake was firm, practiced. I'm Dennis Cole. Thank you for coming in. He led us into a private room. The walls were lined with neatly framed certificates and photographs, smiling couples shaking hands, ribbon cuttings, the usual performative credibility. A polished oak table stood in the center with 2 glasses of water already poured. I'll get right to it, he said, settling across from us. Mr. Horace Loring passed away 3 years ago. His original will, filed in 2015, named Odessa as the sole beneficiary. However, last year, a revised will was submitted by your daughter and son-in-law, Callista and Joran Langley. Odessa's eyes narrowed slightly. Submitted where? To probate court, he said gently. In private proceedings. He reached into a folder, sliding over a copy of the document. Her name was absent. Instead, it read, all property, accounts, and holdings shall pass to Callista Langley and Joran Langley in equal measure. Odessa's hand slowly moved toward the paper. Her fingers hovered over the text, then fell away. That's not Horace's handwriting, she said, voice barely a whisper. Dennis nodded. You're not the first to say that. The signature was witnessed by your children, both of them. Silence filled the room like cold fog. I stared at the paper, then back at Dennis. You're saying they removed her, after everything? Odessa didn't move. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came. I was married to him for 39 years, she said finally, voice soft, even. He promised me I'd be safe. I reached across the table, covering her hand with mine. Dennis leaned forward, speaking gently. We can challenge it. There's a path forward. But it won't be quick. And we'd need strong proof. Handwriting analysis, document history, digital trails, and they'll fight back. Odessa pulled her hand away, folding it in her lap. No, she said quietly. Let them keep the money. I turned to her, shocked. Mom! I want them to lose something else, she said, eyes locked on the lawyer. I want them to lose their faces, their reputation, their illusion. That drive home felt longer than it should have. The city passed by in a blur of muted grays and brake lights. Odessa didn't speak, but I could tell something in her had changed. It wasn't the kind of broken silence I'd seen in the airport. This one had edges, sharp and defined. Back in the house, she moved like a woman who'd stopped expecting the floor beneath her to be stable. I offered to make tea, but she waved it off. I don't want revenge, she said, settling into her usual spot at the dining table. I want dignity. She looked at me then, clear-eyed. Do you understand the difference? I nodded. But deep down, I wasn't sure I did. Not yet. That night, long after she'd gone to bed, I pulled out my laptop. I couldn't sleep anyway. My fingers moved before my brain had caught up, muscle memory guiding me through encrypted files and backdoor channels. I hadn't used these contacts in years. People from my early consulting days, people who owed me favors, emails, metadata, time-stamped PDFs, version histories, digital fingerprints don't lie. I scrolled through old backups of Dad's scanned documents, a small signature discrepancy in 2015, another in 2018, but in 2022, nothing matched. The document filed by Callista was created on her work laptop. I could tell by the embedded user ID. Sloppy. She didn't even try to cover her tracks. I flagged the file, exported it, encrypted it again. The work didn't feel heavy, it felt like breathing. It was nearly 3 a.m. when I stepped out of my room to stretch. The kitchen light was still on. On the table, right in the center, sat a small white envelope, my name written on the front in cursive, careful, and familiar. I opened it slowly. Inside, wrapped in tissue, was Mom's old pendant, gold, slightly dulled by time, but still beautiful. I remembered it well. She used to wear it every day when I was little, always tucked just beneath her blouse. Alongside it, a small handwritten note. You gave me back my voice. Now use yours. I sat down at the table and stared at that note for a long time. I thought we'd finally have peace. But then the inheritance lawyer called. And so I did. On the day of the family reconciliation dinner. The invitation had come 2 days after the envelope. Subject line, family dinner, let's heal. Callista had even added a smiley face, like she was texting an old friend from college and not the sister she'd quietly erased from our mother's life. I showed the email to Mom as we sat on the back porch, the sunlight pooling over the edge of the table. Odessa squinted at the screen, then shrugged like she'd just read the weather. Well, she said, tapping her tea mug, if they want to pretend, let's give them a show. I smiled, not in amusement, but in quiet understanding, the kind you share with someone who's endured the same storm long enough to recognize when the clouds are artificial. I slid the folder from under my chair and placed it in my tote bag. I won't yell, I told her. I'll just let them speak for themselves. The restaurant was one of those places Callista always gravitated to. High ceilings, overpriced steaks, linen napkins folded like origami. The host led us past glittering tables and wine racks into a private room in the back. It was dimly lit, with a polished oak table and a view of the courtyard fountain, fancy enough to stage sincerity, private enough to hide a breakdown. Callista was already there, wearing pearl earrings and a lavender dress too cheerful for her eyes. Joran stood beside her, shifting his weight like a man waiting for a verdict. They offered hugs, awkward, lukewarm ones that barely touched shoulders. Mom accepted them with the poise of someone shaking hands with ghosts. Dinner began with a toast. Callista raised her glass. To family, may we always find our way back. I met her gaze and gently raised my own. To truth, may it never stay buried. Joran gave a short laugh, confused, maybe nervous. Callista blinked like she hadn't heard me right. I set my glass down and reached into my tote bag. 3 manila envelopes. I placed them neatly on the table, one by one. No words. Just thud, thud, thud. Joran leaned forward, eyes narrowing. What's that? Before we eat, I said, looking around the table. Some clarity. Callista's mouth twitched. Rowena, is this really? I ignored her, turning to our cousin David, one of the few family members with a law degree and a conscience. I slid the first envelope to him. Email printouts, bank transfers, flight bookings, APS reports. And the will? You'll find the handwriting analysis on page 4. David opened the flap slowly, eyes scanning the first few pages. His expression didn't shift much, but I saw the way his shoulders stiffened. Callista's voice rose. "This is harassment." I looked at her, calm. "You made Mom invisible," I said. "I'm just turning on the light." She looked at Joran. "Are you going to let her do this?" Joran opened his mouth, but whatever defense he'd planned crumbled in the silence. Odessa hadn't spoken yet. She just watched them, hands folded, eyes steady. Then, slowly, she stood. "You left me at the airport," she said, voice clear, no tremble. "You left me like I was already dead. And now you want peace?" No one answered. Forks sat untouched on napkins, wine glasses barely tipped. Callista tried to stand, her chair scraping the floor. David blocked her path gently with one hand. "You committed inheritance fraud," he said quietly. "I'd recommend you sit." Joran muttered something, but no one caught the words. Callista's face was drained, not from embarrassment, but from calculation, like a chess player realizing too late the board was rigged before she even moved. Odessa turned to me and nodded. She didn't need to say anything more. I rose with her, pulling her coat from the back of her chair. No gloating, no scene, just ending. As we walked past the glass doors, the night air wrapped around us, crisp, freeing. "You didn't destroy them," Mom said, her voice softer now. "You let them destroy themselves." I exhaled. The weight in my chest didn't vanish, but it loosened, like laces untied after too many years pulled tight. I looked up at the sky, stars peeking between city lights. It felt like closure. But it wasn't over, not yet. Because the last thing Dad left behind was a recording. The sun hadn't fully set when we pulled into the parking lot of the law office. Odessa sat beside me, silent, her eyes fixed on the windshield like it held the answer to a question she hadn't yet asked aloud. The wind shifted the hem of her coat as we stepped out of the car, the late spring air carrying that strange blend of cool nerves and warm dust. I held the door open for her. She didn't speak as we walked through the quiet hallway, only gave a small nod to the receptionist who led us to the back office. Dennis Cole wasn't in yet. It was his assistant who had called. Her voicemail had come through just after we got home from that dinner. "Ms. Loring, this is Amy, from Cole Wilkes. We were clearing out some archived storage and we found something. It's a digital voice file from Mr. Horace Loring. We think you and your mother should come in." The word "found" had stuck with me. Found, like it had been forgotten. Like my father's last attempt to make things right had been sitting somewhere in the dark, waiting for someone to care enough to dust it off. Now, sitting in the leather chairs across from Dennis's desk, Odessa reached for my hand. Her fingers felt cold against mine. Dennis entered a few minutes later, holding a small USB drive between his fingers. "I didn't know it existed either," he said. "Apparently Horace gave it to one of the junior staff here, back when he thought he'd be traveling for that surgery in Houston." I swallowed hard. "So he made this knowing something might go wrong?" Dennis nodded solemnly. He titled it, "In Case I Can't Come Back." He walked around his desk, slid the drive into his laptop, and clicked play. The speakers crackled for a second. Then a voice I hadn't heard in over a year filled the room. "If you're hearing this, it means something went wrong. Either I didn't make it, or something else happened I couldn't control." Odessa's lips parted slightly, her eyes locked on the screen, even though there was nothing to see. "I've asked Dennis to keep this recording private unless things get messy. And if they are, then you know what I feared." He paused on the tape, exhaling audibly. "I made some changes recently. Callista and Joran came to me, said they needed part of the trust to secure a business loan. They were persuasive. Callista said Odessa would never understand modern investment. I thought it was temporary. I thought I'd fix it later." Odessa's grip on my hand tightened. I could feel her breathing shift. shorter, shallower. But if you're playing this, I guess I didn't fix it. I regret that. There was silence for a few beats. Then his voice came back, lower now. Rowena, I know we didn't always see eye to eye, but I watched you. You never backed down when it counted. I'm asking you now. Protect your mother. And if I didn't do enough before, then let this be something. The audio ended with a soft click. Odessa sat still for a long moment. Then, as if something broke free inside her, she turned away from the desk and let out a trembling breath. Her shoulders shook. Tears slid silently down her face. I reached across and pulled a tissue from Dennis's desk, handed it to her, but didn't let go of her hand. He knew, she whispered. He knew they were taking advantage of him. He tried to stop it. And he left it to us to finish what he couldn't, I said gently. Dennis leaned forward. That recording changes everything. It's admissible. We can challenge the changes made to the trust. We can go after Callista and Joran if you want. Odessa didn't speak for a moment. Then she sat up straighter, wiped her face with the back of her hand. I don't want their money, she said, voice steady now. But I want the truth on record. I want this to live in paper, in court filings, in facts. I looked over at Dennis and nodded. We file, not for the estate, but to set things right. He smiled, not unkindly. That'll sting them more than any check ever could. We left the office just after 8. The sky was dark now, but not heavy, the kind of night where grief didn't suffocate. It just sat beside you like an old friend who'd finally said what needed saying. At home, Odessa went straight to her room. I followed a few minutes later and opened the wooden box she kept on the bookshelf in the hallway. Inside, I found their old wedding photo, taken in a courthouse garden on a windy November afternoon. They looked so young, so hopeful. I brought it to the kitchen and placed it on the counter. Then I lit a small white candle next to it. The flame flickered gently, casting shadows over their smiles. A moment later, Odessa came in. She held something in her palm. It was the pendant, the one he gave her on their 20th anniversary, a simple silver locket she hadn't worn in months. She set it beside the photo. He spoke, she said softly, her eyes not leaving the candle. And now, so can I. We stood there in silence, not mourning, but remembering. I didn't expect the news crew outside our door the next morning. At first, I thought maybe someone had taken a wrong turn down our sleepy street. But then I saw the woman, probably in her 30s, dressed in a pale blazer, standing on the porch like she already knew the weight of what she'd come to ask. Ms. Loring? She said as I opened the door halfway. I'm Jenna Reyes, Channel 8. We saw your recent legal filing. Would you or your mother be willing to speak on record? I blinked at her, momentarily unsure how they'd even found us. Public records, of course. That recording had gone into the file with the petition, and apparently, it didn't take long for someone to notice. Behind her, a 2-person camera crew adjusted their equipment. Jenna held a small handheld mic, but her eyes weren't aggressive. They were curious, maybe even kind. Before I could answer, I heard Odessa's footsteps behind me. If they want to hear it, she said quietly. Maybe it's time we tell them. I turned. Only if it's on our terms. She gave me the faintest nod. Then let's sit down. You'll need coffee. We didn't glam up or change clothes. Odessa wore her soft gray cardigan and slippers. I wore jeans and my old work tee. But we cleared a small space in the dining room, and Jenna promised she wouldn't edit our words into something salacious. The camera started rolling. Odessa sat up straighter. My name is Odessa Loring, she began, voice steady. And last winter my children left me alone in an airport. They took the car. They knew I couldn't walk far. They told me to wait, but they never came back. I could feel a tightness crawl up my throat, but she wasn't crying. She wasn't even shaking. I waited for 3 hours, she continued. Then I called my daughter, Rowena. She drove all night to get me. I don't want pity. I want people to stop forgetting the people who raised them. Jenna's eyes softened. I stepped in, adding only what mattered. There was a trust. It was manipulated after my father passed. But this isn't about the money. It's about the truth. They thanked us afterward, packed their gear respectfully, and said the segment would air at 7. I didn't expect much. Local stories usually got buried under traffic reports and weather alerts. But by the time the sun dipped behind the hills, our phones were vibrating non-stop. My inbox, Odessa's social media, even the landline, the story had struck a nerve. This broke my heart. We failed our elders. I saw my mother in her eyes. They left my grandmother at a gas station once. I never forgave them. Some offered prayers, others offered resources. A retired nurse from Kansas wrote she'd seen it too many times in silence. A young man from Illinois asked how he could help. The clip went viral within 24 hours. But with the light came the shadow. I got a call the next afternoon from Dennis, the attorney. "They want to settle," he said. I didn't even have to ask who. Quietly, I'm guessing. Of course, Callista's company is hemorrhaging brand deals. Joran's been put on administrative leave from his board appointment. I walked into the kitchen, Odessa sitting by the window sipping tea, reading another handwritten letter that had arrived in our mailbox. A woman from Oregon. She'd included a photo of her mother, now gone. "Tell them," I said to Dennis. "The silence was their choice, not ours." He let out a low breath. Understood. By the end of that week, Odessa was trending on Twitter. Not for drama or rage, but for grace. She didn't read the comments anymore. Not all of them, at least. But she kept a printed stack of the ones that meant something. They sat in a small tray beside the TV, between her knitting bag and a bowl of butterscotch candies. That weekend, I opened the laptop and started sketching something that had been sitting in the back of my mind for weeks. An idea, a space, a return. By early June, I filed the paperwork. The Quiet Return. It would be a small non-profit, focused on elder dignity, advocacy, housing security, and something simple but profound, a volunteer network to accompany elderly passengers at airports, so no one had to wait alone, so no one had to wonder if the car was really coming back. I used some of my consulting savings to get it started. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was a beginning. The first board meeting was held in the back room of a community center downtown. We brought store-bought cookies and a jug of lemonade. Odessa walked in, leaning slightly on her cane. I helped her into the seat at the head of the table. "Mom," I said, sliding the placard toward her. "You're chair emeritus." She stared at it for a second, then let out a quiet laugh, the first in a long time that didn't carry a trace of sorrow. "Does that come with snacks?" she asked. We all laughed. And for once, it didn't feel like we were laughing in spite of something, but because we could. As the meeting went on, Odessa sat quietly, listening, occasionally nodding. Once, she raised her hand. "We should include small-town airports," she said. "Those are the ones where people forget." At the end of the day, I drove us home. The sun was warm on the dashboard. Odessa rested her hand lightly over mine. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded. "Better than I've been in a long time." That night, after she went to bed, I stayed in the kitchen. The candle from my father's photo was still there. It had burned low, almost gone. I looked out over the stack of folders on the table, plans for the nonprofit, media inquiries, even a note from a former mayor offering to help, and I whispered, almost without meaning to, "You gave me everything, Mom. I just returned the favor.